Governments, have deliberately gone out on a policy that has the effect of putting up energy prices. I mean, we used to have cheap energy in Australia. It was predominantly coal-fired. Governments have decided to take coal-fired power stations or make them uncompetitive, through policy, because they wanted to cut carbon emissions, and energy prices have gone up. They've gone up. I mean, this by the way, I don't think was a mere accidental byproduct. This was a very deliberate policy to make what was cheap coal-fired energy much more expensive, and people are paying for that. Yes, they're paying for that.
And that gives rise to, in my mind, another great question. I think the confusion and indeed the obfuscation over the real objectives of energy policy over the last 10 years has helped contribute to the breakdown of trust in the system, but particularly in our parliaments and in our politicians, because people have not been prepared to go and spell out the intended consequences of their policies.
I think that's true. I think that a lot of politicians tried to have it every way and tried to tell the public they could have it every way. That you could reduce emissions and there wouldn't be any cost. In fact, power become cheaper. You could have it all. Now, you couldn't have it all. And when it became clear that, in fact, renewable energy targets and the closure of baseload power stations was making the grid less reliable, and prices were going up, instead of saying, oh, by the way, that's a deliberate consequence of this policy, that's what you've got to do in order to save the planet, they said, oh no, that was never our intention, that wasn't, there's no connection. And I think people figure out there is a connection somewhere. They may not know how, but I think they have figured out there's a connection in there somewhere.
Now, this is a critical issue as I see it, and I'd be interested in your views. This breakdown of trust, I think, is fuelled by that refusal by too many of our leaders, too many of our politicians, to front the people who are going to be affected by their policy decisions. So, for example, if you believe that decarbonising the Australian economy is more important than the job of a person who works in a smelter works or in a food processing factory, trust, if it's to be built up, maintained, built up, and it's critical to the future of democracy, surely demands that you go and look that person in the eye and say, I'm sorry, decarbonising the Australian economy is more important to the country and indeed to you than your job.
And to the planet.
Yeah. So, but doesn't that break trust? I mean, what I'm driving at here is...
They've tried to tell people that, you can do all of that and there won't be any consequences.
That's my point.
Of course there will be consequences.
Of course there will be. There were meant to be. Julia Gillard confessed that the objective of her carbon tax was to change people's behaviour. That's right. When it became unpopular, oh no, it was all the dirty big... It was the big polluters' fault.
Well, I can remember when all this was being discussed. The Greens and the government were quite clear they wanted to close the Hazelwood power station, which was brown coal, one of the biggest power stations in Australia, but it was brown coal, which is more carbon emission intensive than black coal, as you know. And lo and behold, it was closed. And when it closed and all these people were thrown out of work, the government said, oh, this is shocking. Oh, we better go down. We better sort of do something. They should never have been put out of work. The object was to put them out of work.